You know, there may be no better story than when somebody gets some credit that's long overdue. And how about a century's worth of credit or more? Well, we have that story tonight by two authors that are coming to visit us to tell us about a story they've written about a gentleman that did a lot of things for the National Football League that he never got credit for. Jeff Miller and John Steffenhagen join us to tell us about Leo Lyons coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And boy, we have a great episode for you tonight. We have two guests that have been on our show before and really have some great information out there on some football history that we've touched a little bit on before. But this is the Rochester Jeffersons, one of the founding members of the National Football League, and their founder, Leo Lyons. And we have Leo Lyons' great-grandson, John Steffenhagen, and Jeff Miller, his co-author that wrote a book recently. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Yeah, so John, why don't you tell us a little bit about, just give us a brief history on Leo and you finding out that about Leo and what he was famous for.
Yeah, I've learned now when people say that, it's like, if you want, I need about 10 hours to tell you. But the basis of it is, my great-grandfather, who passed away when I was 9. So I did know him. I used to go over to his house. And there's stories, George Ellis and Art Rooney were there one time as I was playing with my Hot Wheel cars. So Leo he started from a very young age. At 16, 18, he had joined the Rochester Jeffersons. And he was obsessed with the idea of pro football. This is before the NFL, obviously. So his son, or his brothers and sisters would always be like, "Oh, baseball," and they would collect cards and stuff. But Leo was like, "Why isn't there a football pro league?" So he had written down in his journal about starting a pro league. So he had written down a step-by-step program. So he ended up making his team. They turned him into the New York State champions in 1916. And then he challenges the Canton Bulldogs and Jim Thorpe in 1917, knowing that he had to get on the football map because the Ohio League was the thing going on. So he challenges Jim Thorpe, and then he goes out there and plays them, tells Jim Thorpe, "I really want to start a league." And he's like, "Well, us guys out here are talking about it as well. I'll contact you when serious plans are going to be made." So in 1920, Leo and Jim Thorpe connect, and Jim tells them to come out to Canton. And on September 17, 1920, they form the NFL. And then onward from there, as a manager, coach, owner of a team, he's constantly in a battle with the city of Rochester, because they totally were against college players coming from all around the country to play for his team. So as he would bring in competition or players to compete on a high level, the people stopped coming out, which in turn meant no money, which means not being able to pay the players. So he stuck it out for 6 seasons in the NFL, which was so many teams had folded then. But he ended up sticking up the 6 seasons, and then after that, he would be involved with collecting football memorabilia from the very day one of the NFL, collected all that stuff, and he became the honorary historian of the NFL in 1960. And then he was behind the opening of the Hall of Fame. It was his idea, going back to letters we have to Joe Carr, to Burt Bell, and P. Rozelle, just constantly saying, "I got all this stuff. We need to form a museum to hold all this stuff." So he was involved with the opening of that as well. So that's some of it.
Yeah, that is
Scratching
amazing.
the surface.
That's just
Yeah.
absurd. Yeah, not even close.
I can remember back in 2021, I think it was, we sat at a Professional Football Researchers Association convention and at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And John,
Mhm.
you got up and you told, I mean, that was the abridged version. You told a story of Leo, and that was the first time I ever heard the name Leo Lyons. And
Mhm.
I think all of us, our mouths were on the floor. And I know Jeff was in attendance at that meeting as well. Jeff, is that the first time you heard and became familiar with Leo also, or did?
Oh no, I had written a book about the Buffalo All-Americans who played, during the same decade of the 1920s and played against the Jeffersons quite often. So I kind of became familiar with Leo at that time. And while I was writing that book, that's when John and I first met. We became acquainted because somebody had passed me along his name as someone who was also doing some research into the same era. And John loaned me a couple of photographs for my book. And then we just became, we began corresponding. We became friends over years. And so, I became more and more familiar. But once we started doing this book, I mean, there was so much more that came out. Like you said, it's like peeling the onion. It wasn't just, he was the founder of the Rochester Jeffersons and a co-founder of the league. He had the idea for trading cards for football to promote the game of football in 1916. I mean, this guy was always thinking 20 steps ahead. He recruited the fourth known black professional football player in the nation to play for his team in 1912. You know, Leo was a groundbreaker, and none of this was like, oh, well, we believe this to be real. John actually has the documentation to back it up. He's got the documents. You know, um, he's got pictures. He's got everything that backs up everything that we're asserting in this book. So, there's a guy here who, in my estimation, may not be in George Hallis's stratosphere, but he's awful damn close because the things that he did were extremely important to the development of the league itself.
Yeah, that is definitely a fascinating story. And John, I believe we had you on probably about 4 years ago, and I
Oh,
think we were talking about Leo's story being an onion. I think we were just maybe scratching the skin of the onion when you were on before, because like you just told me earlier before we came on, you're learning stuff daily, and even after you got done with the book, you're learning stuff. And I guess before we go too far and you answer that question, why don't you give us the title of the book, John, and where people can get it.
Yes, it's titled Leo Lyons, the Rochester Jeffersons, and the Birth of the NFL through McFarland Publishing.
All right, so yeah, go ahead and maybe tell us, how this story just keeps evolving. What's maybe the most surprising thing that you've ever learned about Leo?
Well, that's even a joke. I mean, there's so much, but I think probably the newer things that through research and finding articles and newspapers and I was always concentrating on sports, but as I looked into like business things with him, he ended up finding that he was contacting, gum companies, Wrigley, Cracker Jack. This is when he's only like 21 years old, and comes up with ideas for cards, trading cards, and he's even saying in there that he doesn't believe in the cigarette tobacco cards. It should be more targeted for children. So why not bubble gum or candy to go with the card? And I mean, and I've got the letters of him proposing it to Joe Carr and proposing it to George Eastman, who here in Rochester, he's got the biggest photographic place. I mean, he could have done so much. And Rochester was the home of Chiclets at that time. They're also a big gum manufacturer. So to him, it seemed very simple. Let's do something to try to promote the NFL. But the NFL saw it as we're too early in our stages of what we've been created. People aren't going to buy them. And he's like, well, why not? Let's try. And they would just shake their heads and no, okay, crazy idea. But it was things like that which I did not know, and I did not know until probably 5 years ago.
and
These things.
if I can jump in here, the thing was, what he's talking about, where Leo wanted to promote the NFL. He wanted to promote football in general back in the 1910s before the NFL was even formed. So he wanted to get people like Charlie Brickley and
Right.
Jim Thorpe to basically, use their image on a football card to promote just football, not necessarily professional. It could have been college, whatever, just the game of football itself. So I think that's where Leo was really, and then the NFL, they just never had the money, like John was saying.
Yeah, so
you're right.
he was trying to create a multi-million-dollar industry before anybody ever trading cards are pretty big now. I hear.
Yeah, and plus the thing with Leo is he never gave up on things. Like as Jeff was saying there, that was the early on parts when he was young, back in 1915, 1960, before the NFL. He wanted to create, even college star football, anything football. He loved football. So, and as that got turned down because of World War I, you got a lot of, well, we can't do this right now. It's during World War I. We can't do this. But then back into the 20s and even the 30s, he's still sending out letters to these companies with actual diagrams, which I have with there's actually a Cracker Jack baseball card attached to one of these old pieces of paper, and he's showing how to set it up. So, yeah, very interesting stuff.
Well, gosh, he could almost invented the toy surprise in the cereal boxes then, huh? Or in the Cracker Jack boxes as well.
I'm still researching.
Yeah, very, very interesting. All right, so Jeff, during your research of Leo, I know you were going back and trying to do some confirmation of some of the things that John was doing, digging into some of these stories.
Yeah.
What was maybe one of the more surprising things that came out of your research?
Well, gosh, there's a lot. I think for me, a lot of it came like John and I were able to acquire all the NFL meeting minutes from 1920 up until 1928 or so, when the Jeffersons finally gave up their franchise. And to me, it's just to look in there and see just how involved Leo really was, because we all hear about Joe Carr, George Halas, maybe Carl Stork, and a few other guys as all the movers and shakers of the league in those days. But Leo was right there making, seconding motions and actually making proposals and talking about stuff. I mean, 1921, Leo's got, in his notes, he's writing down the league is talking about dividing into geographical groupings. So they were talking about divisions in 1921. Everybody talks about, well, George Preston Marshall came up with that idea. Well, Leo, and I don't know if it was actually Leo's idea, but he actually wrote it all down. So, and I get the impression that he had something to do with that. So, he had like Buffalo, Rochester, and these teams are going to be in the East, and, the Chicagos and all those other teams are going to be in the West, and all these divisions. And Leo was part of this. Leo was part of the reshaping of the football, so it's more aerodynamic. He's got notes about how he wrote to George Halas and said, Jim Thorpe and I have been talking about the football. It's too big. We need to streamline so people can throw it. This is, who gets the credit for that? Other people, not Leo. And to me, that was the stuff that I found most fascinating. Like, this guy, there's so much that he did, or so much that he wanted to do. And if it was something he never got accomplished, it's because he got stymied by the league. If it's something that he was actually took a part in, like the football, he just didn't get the credit because he wasn't one of the guys who was still around after 1925. Those are the guys who get all the credit for everything, because Mira comes in 1925, and then Rooney comes in 33, and then that's the league that we all know, Lambeau, but we don't know too much about Leo Lyons or the Buffalo All-Americans even. It's, those other guys got all the credit because they were the mainstays.
Yeah, you said something that reminded me a story that John, maybe you could tell us again. You talked about how Leo would write things down and predict things, and I believe you had a story when he was much younger, a teenager, and some of his goals. He was jotting down some of his goals.
Yeah, I mean, he had the NFL logo. Basically, he conceived that when he was in high school or younger age. He'd said in his notes, like Jim Thorpe's uniform. And so I looked back and looked in the Olympics in 1912, and that's when he had written the journal note. I think it was 1912. And it was the emblem, the USA emblem on his shirt. But he wrote it Major League Football across instead of the NFL, it said Major League Football. That was his idea for a name of a league. But this is, again, 6-7 years before the NFL existed. I mean, he was those are his ideas already way before. And then when he proposed the logo, he wrote that in his journal. His details and notes were amazing. The time, the weather, things like that, people, that reactions and stuff. And so he said in one of the meetings, we had the meeting minutes, but one of the meeting minutes, they were discussing the league and its recognition. And Leo had brought up, why not a logo like Major League Baseball? Like, you have a identifier. Again, he wrote in his own notes, only because I'm not George Halas. And he had a lot of that in his notes. He's like, anybody else, they would have listened, but not from Leo Lyons. So things like that. I mean, we came across tons of things. And a lot of the notes, I don't want to give too much up for the book, but there's so much. I mean, eating dinner with Jim Thorpe 3 days before they formed the league. I'm like, and just as
in Rochester.
Wow.
So now, like, people are like, oh, come on, now that sounds far-fetched. Like, he had dinner. Why would Jim Thorpe be in 1920 in Rochester? So he had me, I couldn't find anything. I'm like, I'm gonna give up. I'm like, I guess we can't use it for the book because I can't prove that even Jim Thorpe was in Rochester. Then I came across one little note in the newspaper in Rochester here. Oh, Jim Thorpe in Rochester. On that date, he was playing for the Akron Pneumatics baseball team of the International League, and they were playing the Rochester Hustlers. So, Leo, here's Jim Thorpe in Rochester. And not only does I find that out, I find out that there's another article I found in another newspaper says Jim Thorpe meets with Leo Lyons of the Jeffersons. And now this is, again, 3 days before the league is begun. And just that stuff. And so, Jim, then we had the issue with dinner. Okay, so they met together in Rochester, but how would he have spent the night in Rochester? That doesn't make sense because they were playing pretty much every day. So come to find out, the Akron Pneumatics had a double header against Rochester, and they happened to spend the night in Rochester. So it was just like, I couldn't make it out. Like, these things I'd find them, and then I would have backups to my original story. I'm like, this is like, it's being written by itself. It's like, because I was
it was pretty cool the way, like John would find something, and I would say, well, we have to verify this. And we were always able to find a note from Leo or a newspaper article or something else, or meeting minutes that would back it up. There was always, so we knew that Leo wasn't full of it. I mean, there was always we were able to back up every single story that we told in this book. It's just incredible.
And there were a lot of stories left out because we couldn't prove it. There's a couple, I got so mad at Jeff. I'm like, we got to put this in the book. And he's like, we can't, because there's no proof of it, and we can't just go by what Leo was saying. And it's like, you're right, because we got to have it factual. It's got to be, no question about it.
Now, John, you were talking about the journal of Leo's. Now, how extensive is this journal? Does it go from him being a teenager till, he's well into his adult years, or is this something that's sort of sporadic, and you're just finding notes on cocktail napkins or something?
Well, no, the Saturday Evening Post, I guess, was his favorite place to write, like, I think after football games or before football games. But he would have the journal, and that's an amazing story, because one of my aunts she found it in a box. It was all just loose little crumbly paper. She thought it was like stuff to wrap stuff in. So I told her, you've got to go through every box, every detail. I mean, the stupidest looking thing, just please look at it. So she was older, so I knew that it wasn't going to be something where she could be, pinpoint accurate. But she had some of these notes, and she just calls me on the phone, and she's like, "What this notes? It says something about met with Halas." And now she's not a football fan; she didn't know who Halas. I'm like, "What?" I go, "Can you please?" And she was in Florida, so I was like, "Can you send me those papers?" So the journal, luckily, it had numbers up at the top because they were all in a plastic baggie, all mixed up. So we put them back together, and the ones that didn't have numbers, we could tell by the weeks of what game he was talking about. So he started it somewhere in 1908, and then up until just after the football team 25, when they were done, it kind of ended there. And just his details of the Grange, we have notes in there where the NFL meeting minutes. This is what Jeff caught, that Carl Stork recorded meeting minutes, and it was for the dates are wrong. So we went back. We're like, let's make sure we're going to be contradicting the league minutes, minutes of the league. And sure enough, because Leo had said that he had left on a Friday or a Saturday, and we went back, we got a calendar and looked, and we're like, yeah, because the Stork had recorded it like it's for Friday, but the date was
Stork got the dates wrong. Yeah.
Jeez. Wow.
So again, Leo had it in his notes. He had it, and it's just nonstop. Like the book could have been 1,000,000 pages. I mean, it never ends.
The great thing too was he detailed, and it's real. We put it in great detail in the book. Leo tried to sign Red Grange for the Rochester Jeffersons, and he actually went and got funding from a mobster to do this. Okay, but he's got all of his details about his itinerary. Like he took the train to visit with Doc Cooley, who was one of Grange's managers, and then he met with his father, and he got the father's word that Rick Grange would sign with Rochester, and it's all detailed in the journal. And it's just incredible. And we got we've got expenses, train costs this amount of money, and it's just so we were able to put together his entire week of leading up to the day that Grange ends up signing with George Halas and the Bears, because Leo was still holding out hope that he was going to be able to sign him, because he has a check for $5,000, and the $5,000 came from the mob. And I don't want to give too much away. The details of it are just fascinating. So you have to read the story to see how it all unfolded, because it's just this sweeping story of, you can't make it up. It's like a movie. It's almost like if you put that story against George Halas's story, and you told it two stories at the same time in a movie. If you go back and forth, like it's this race to get Grange, and Halas gets Grange, but Leo was that close, and it probably would have killed him, financially to sign Grange. But still, it was just a fascinating story.
Yeah, and not to mention all that, following that up of how, again, I'm not going to give a lot for the book, but what happened. I mean, he literally details going when he played against the New York Giants at the Polo Grounds, how Tim Mara had talked to him about he also wanted Grange. So, I mean, you had details of him talking to these guys before it actually happened. And then, we'll lost the track of thought. But yeah, the details are just like how it's kept. It's fascinating. Oh, I know. I'm sorry. George, the involvement, it was interesting because George Halas and Leo had become friends from that first meeting in 1920. So there's a lot of letters between the two. They struck up a friendship very early on. And Jeffersons played the Bears in 1921 and 1922. And there was a lot of not bickering, picking on each other back and forth in letters. And what was interesting that when it was happening, George Halas was telling Leo that he's not going to come to Rochester. So here you got these two guys that are bidding for him, but they're friends, and he's telling them he's not going to come to Rochester. And then Leo's like, I've got to try, because I can't, in my conscience, I have to try. Even though Leo had written later on, he's like, I knew I would never get him. But he was there in that hotel room, and George Halas writes that in his autobiography, that Leo Lyons was sitting in that hotel room trying to get him. And it's like, he had no chance. I mean, it was zero chance. But just to even show how involved that, I mean, there's like, again, the Onion, even in a story, it peels. Now, he was, that day, the Jeffersons had a football game in Detroit. That day, that Thorpe was going to be at the Morrison Hotel. So Leo jumps. What's that?
Grange was going to be at the Morrison Hotel.
Yes, Grange is going to be there. So Leo jumps off the train on the way to Detroit, goes to where the Thorpe. Grange was going to be signed to try to sign him. Then the rest of the team goes up to Detroit to play, and then the next day he jumps out of training and goes to Detroit that morning to manage the team. But just like his whole life was like that. And when I see some people, like, oh, this guy did this or this guy did this. This was this guy's life, and it's just like for no one to know who he is it's mind-boggling to me.
It sounds like it. Now, Jeff, this question is for you. So you have all these little pieces of story that John's sharing with you and pulling out the Saturday Evening Post with the scribbles on it and the notes and everything. How long did it take you two to research this, to get all this information, organize it, and verify it, and then put it into book form?
Well, John probably had 75% of the research already done because he's been researching Leo all his life, and a lot of it was there. Most of it was me, verifying stuff. I would try to verify stuff myself. I'm a researcher myself, but John enjoys that part of it too. So he might give me something while I'm writing. I'm doing most of the writing part of it, and I'll say to him, "Okay, we're kind of stuck here because Leo's saying this, but I can't verify it." And I think that John relished that. Like, I'm going to prove it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So to me, it was like putting this puzzle together. And I'm sure I frustrated him at times. He'll probably tell you that. But to me, I wanted to make sure that we were telling the most complete story, but accurately. If Leo says he did something, I wanted him, damn it all, to get credit for it. If that was talking about the Hall of Fame or signing Red Grange or whatever, I wanted to make sure that we could tell this story. And no one could come to us and say that's not, there's no way. John's got all the documentation to back it up.
Yeah. Very, very fascinating. Now, I mean, something that impresses me, John, every time I see you, whether it's at one of Jeff's meetings up in Western New York for PFRA, I know a few years ago, that I'm apologetically a Steelers fan, and I remember you had a tape measure sitting there on a table in front of you, and you said, "Oh, I've got a story for you." Why don't you share that story? What you told me about that tape measure?
Well, the people don't know that my great grandfather Leo, he left me. He left his granddaughter, my mother, boxes and boxes of documents, this is what a lot of it's based on. And league letters between commissioners, and there was also a lot of things in these boxes, like a pair of cleats, an old football, even a tape measure, a first aid kit. So my mom told me, don't ever throw this stuff away. And that's what Leo told me, and just don't throw it away. So when she gave it to me when I was a kid, of course I looked at it and I'm like, it's just junk. So it stayed in our storage room forever, like up there. And then when I moved out as a younger man, got married, I brought the stuff with me, but I went straight to the closet. It was like, it's like, it looks just like junk. I remember
I'm sure your new bride was real happy about these old boxes of tape measures and cleats, right?
Oh, yeah. How many times she wanted me to just dump them, and I'm like, I don't know. So things that I would have, like the first aid kit, I had that out in my garage. It got paint on it. It got dents in it. And then I would find out later on through inventory lists that he had sent to P. Roselle. Oh, that's a first aid kit the Jeffersons used the first 6 seasons of the NFL, given to him by George Eastman, because George Eastman thought pro football was a joke. So he just, in jest, he goes, "You want this cabinet on my wall?" And they go, "Sure." He takes it right off the wall. And so Leo is like such a character. I mean, so the tape measure, again, that thing really could have been thrown because it's a small, old antique Lufkin tape measure, the one with the round spool. Mm-hmm. So that was there. So I'm thinking nothing of it. That was in the bottom of one of the boxes. So I'm coming across the inventory list, which lists a 1933 Art Rooney tape measure. That's all it says. So I look at the thing and I said, "Oh, there is something scribbled on it." I'm like, "Oh, I can make out an AJR, Arthur J. Rooney." It's like I can see it. It's not very easily recognized. And there it is, and it says -33. So I'm like, I'm like, all right, so now I really got to find this one because I wasn't even going to tell anybody about it because I'm like, who's going to believe me? It's just an old tape measure. I could have scraped the letters in there. It's like, who knows? So then I start digging. I came across it looking for something else, but come to find out that Art Rooney's um, brother or uncle, some relative, worked on the Forbes field crew for their first game against the Giants. And it said in this article, it was in a little article in Pittsburgh newspaper, that after the game, they were always ball busting on each other, and the Steelers lost. And this guy, who I believe his last name is Fogarty, I haven't found the guy's name. Um, he gave Art Rooney this tape measure and said, this is a consolation prize. You didn't win, but here's the tape measure, because I found out that day that the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team had played on that field, on Forbes Field, and they had to get ready for the first doubleheader. It was a baseball football night. So he used that tape measure to mark off the chalk lines for the field. I mean, again, on and on and on. And so, again, I'm like, okay, I'm wondering how he got it. And then later on, my uncle had told me about some things that Art Rooney had. And Leo, being the historian of the league, had begged Art to give me something from your team. There's something like, he was in his office talking about it, in Rooney's office, and he said, "You want something, Leo?" And he, like, they're just smoking cigars, talking. He goes into his drawer and pulls out this tape measure and says, "This is from our first game against the Giants." He's like, "I'll take it." Like, Leo would just take anything, and he gave it to him. And then, not only was that enough proof, Dan Rooney, Art's son, I contacted him probably 20 years ago, and we were talking about stuff, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Leo has spent a lot of time in Art's office. They're always, just talking about football and stuff." And Leo was always bugging him about, "Come on, give me this football, or give me this thing in your office." So I'm like, that would make sense that if he had an old tape measure, he gave it to him. So it's like, again, every story has like 15 layers to it. It was like ridiculous. But good because it gave more credence to what these items were. But there was a lot of items on this list. I'll tell you, I probably got 16 of them, but there were pages of pages, and I've never seen these. So they've either gone to the Hall of Fame, they got thrown out. There was a Red Grange football jersey from 1925 or 26. I'm like, oh my God.
It could be his rookie uniform if it's 25, right?
I mean, oh my God. But God only knows. But I know he donated a lot of it.
Wow.
So
Now,
yeah.
now, Jeff, tell us a little bit about how the book is structured. Is there, I mean, we know it's full of stories. We're hearing that, but do you have like images to go with it? And
Oh yeah, we have over 50 images. Not there's several game action photos, but a lot of it is the documents. We wanted to make sure that the documentation, we showed it so people couldn't question. Oh, how do you prove that he was corresponding with Walter Camp in 1916 to for him to get him to decide the New York State championship? Or how do you know that Leo really had all these items that he claimed to have? Well, we've got his inventory list that he personally hand typed and scribbled on, or the Saturday Evening Post cover that he wrote the meeting minute, or not the official meeting minutes, but his recollections or impressions of the first meeting in September 1920. So we were able to take all this stuff and just kind of lay it all out. So it's a typical biography in that it follows a timeline of his life, but we were just able to use so many of these documents and just to say, well, yeah, here's a page from his journal from 1922 where you can see where he drew the shield that he was proposing for the NFL. And there's a couple. One says Major League Football, one says National Football or NFL, one says MFL or whatever, Major League Football. So we just kind of planted those things in there and it just kind of used them as signposts along the way. People know we're not full of it, and Leo's not full of it.
Well, I was gonna say Leo's not full of it. I know personally you guys are full of it sometimes, but that's a different story
Yes.
altogether here. But not the book, not the book. So,
Right.
well, guys, this is really, really sounds like a great book here. And John, why don't you tell us again the name of the book and where folks can get a copy of it?
Yeah, it's by McFarland Publishing, author Jeffrey J. Miller and John Steffenhagen. The title of the book is Leo Lyons, The Rochester Jeffersons, and the Birth of the NFL. And it can be found at McFarland Publishing, Amazon, and the ebook is available currently on Barnes and Noble, which we're doing a book signing soon here. But yeah, I'm sure they're gonna get it in soon as well.
Okay, you're doing some book signings. Do you have like a website or anything that people can go to find out where you guys are going to be at signing books?
Barnes and Noble's gonna post when it's during the Bills mini camp or the training camp, which again has a tie-in with Leo being the co-founder of the NFL, and then his daughter being the co-founder of St. John Fisher, where the Bills had their training camp. So again, everything just fit right in, and thank God the newspaper had posted things about her being the founder because people would be like, all right, this guy's really stretching it here. It's like the Bills are coming to his daughter, so they're going to be posting things, and I have www.rochesterjeffersons.org, my website. I'm going to be posting in that because that just got finalized today.
And I have a Facebook. We both have Facebook page. We'll be posting our itinerary on that as the dates come up.
I wanted to say too, I should have said it earlier, Jeff, his patience is like a saint, because the things that we went through during those 4 years, I think it was 4 years, about 4 years researching. And, I'd come across something in the middle of the night and I would call him, Jeff, look, hey, I found this. He's like, John, we'll look at it tomorrow. Or, no, look at this. And it would just drive him crazy. He'd go, all right, we'll look into it. And then I would be doing it to him all the time. And then, yeah, it drove him crazy. So I just want to say thank you, Jeff, because
no, but we share the passion for getting, seeking out what happened and telling an accurate story. And that's I know John didn't want to write a book that just told stories and somebody could question. So when he had something, I knew that it was important.
And it's good because I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But just gonna say that, yeah, it was important because we have so many friends like Darren, just so many historians and researchers are friends. It's like, we know that, it'll be awkward if we said something that they were like, that's not true, so we knew we had to be on. And then there's, a lot more we don't even know historians, but they'll know,
Yeah, because, we have a wide circle of friends who are football historians, Darren, and, a lot of them. And, they're the ones who are going to know. The average reader who might just say, well, I'm interested in Rochester history or football history, they might read it and just say, oh, this is great. But, if, somebody who's really, steeped in knowledge about the NFL, like Ken Crippen or, George Bazika or TJ Troop or Chris Willis, they're going to look at that and they're going to go, no. So we wanted to make sure that it was accurate. And quite frankly, I think this book is 100% airtight. Everything we're saying in this book is accurate and can be proven. It's amazing. This guy is a Forrest Gump of the NFL and never got the credit he deserved. That's the way I describe him to people when they're asking me, what are you writing about? Because you can tell people you're writing about George Halas, they'll know that, or Ralph Wilson or Art Rooney, but nobody knows Leo Lyons until now. And we're going to change that.
Well, that is a great mission, and it's always great to hear when people are preserving football history, and especially giving folks the credit that they're due, even though it's 100 years later after they've done it or more. In this case with Leo, and we are sure glad that you guys have put this together. And folks, if you missed the name of the book or where to get it, we're going to be posting some of those links in the show notes of the podcast and on the YouTube channel show notes, and we'll also try to get some links in there to get connected to Jeff and John's everyone's social media so you know their upcoming events that are coming up. Gentlemen, we really appreciate you coming on here, sharing this book with us and the story of Leo in your book, and coming on here tonight and helping to preserve football history.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate you doing what you're doing. I mean, again, keeping history alive. I mean, that's my main reason for the book. Is like, I'm so sad that these people spent their whole lives doing things, accomplishing all this, and no one ever knows about it. So you do a great job with your podcast and things that you do, your books. I'll keep it alive.
And people don't know this, but Darren has come to our Western New York conferences on a couple of occasions to give presentations. So we appreciate that, Darren.
Well, yes. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.